Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of On a High Note, which is a new series of digital conversations in partnership between the University of Manitoba's Desautels Faculty of Music and the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. In this series, we're talking to professional musicians about their careers to address some topics that might be of interest to high school students looking possibly to pursue careers in music, but also to the general public, wondering a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes in the life of a professional musician. So I'm really delighted to be in such excellent company today with the members of the Clearwater String Quartet. And I would love if we could just go around and if each of you could introduce yourselves, say your name, what you play, and I thought maybe a nice way to start would be to also add your favorite Beethoven string quartet. And maybe we'll just spend the whole hour arguing about which one's the best. I've got Karl in the top left of my screen. So Karl, would you like to start?
Okay, if I remember all that. Hi, Naomi, thank you very much. My name is Karl Stobbe. I play the violin. And my favorite Beethoven string quartet, I would have to say, is Opus 95, nicknamed the Serioso in F minor.
Okay.
And what else? Was I supposed to answer other questions? I can't remember now.
That's
I
great.
should write them all
Maybe that's okay. I haven't written them down either. What can you tell me about your role in Winnipeg at the symphony?
I'm the associate concertmaster of the symphony. So my role is to play the violin, beside Gwen. And I don't know. Other than that, I do what everybody else does, I guess.
I realize I should have gone in score order. That would have been easier. But here's Yuri's next on my screen. So Yuri.
Hi, yeah, I'm Yuri Hooker, and I'm the principal cellist with the Winnipeg Symphony, and of course the cellist with the Clearwater String Quartet as well. I don't know that I have a favorite Beethoven string quartet. I probably have a favorite movement, and that would be the Heiliger Dankgesang from in the late string quartets of Beethoven. It's just I would say probably the late quartets in general are my favorite. It's just music that it could have been written at any time. It's just so staggering and fresh.
Thanks, Yuri. Gwen.
Hi, my name is Gwen Hoebig, and I am also a violinist with the orchestra. I am the concertmaster. My favorite Beethoven string quartet has to be Opus 127. That is one of my absolute favorite pieces in the whole wide world.
Thank you. And last but not least, Dan.
Hi, my name is Dan Scholz. I have been principal viola with the Winnipeg Symphony for 25 years. Just finished my anniversary year, cut short, and played with the Clearwater Quartet since its inception as the Clearwater Quartet. My favorite Beethoven quartet, I think, is Opus 127 as well. It's just, I listen to it in the car, I listen to it when I'm out for a walk. It's something that's always on for me. So I have Opus 127, and then I have the Goldberg variations playing back and forth usually.
Okay, well, that's actually a great segue into the question I wanted to ask you, which is, can you tell me a little bit about how the Clearwater String Quartet came to be? Dan, maybe, yeah.
Gwen, why don't you? Yeah.
Maybe I'll take over on that one. It was when David and I moved to Winnipeg 33 years ago. One of our really necessary outlooks that we needed to do was to play chamber music, and the obvious place to start was with our colleagues in the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, because we are all the top performing musicians in the city. So David, with the help of Bill and Shirley Lavin, started the Winnipeg Chamber Music Society, and we started playing concerts at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. For the first 3 years, we were not eligible for the Manitoba Arts Council grants, and so Bill and Shirley funded us for the first 3 years, and then we were able to get onto the regular granting from the Manitoba Arts Council, so that's allowed us to continue. The Clearwater Quartet sort of came about as a result of Bill and Irmgard Berg, because we had been playing together because of the Chamber Music Society, and then the four of us just seemed to really click. We are all founding members of the Clearwater Quartet, which is amazing since we've been together now since, I don't know, 1920.
16 years probably since I've been in the Chamber Music Society.
Yeah. So that is how it all came to be, and then the four of us really loved playing together. We all had young children at the same time, so there were just so many things that clicked. And I think it was at some point on the deck of Bill and Irmgard's, we were trying to search around for a name because they had us out to play concerts every year at Labor Day, that we stumbled upon Clearwater and it stuck. So that's sort of how it happened. From my end, I think probably the others would have some more information on that one.
Well, if I could just add, the Clearwater, because the deck was on Bill and Irmgard's cabin, which is on Clearwater Bay. And so it was Clearwater Bay, and then it just became the Clearwater Quartet.
So there weren't other debates or other names in the mix?
Well, I think we ran a few down, but just nothing seemed to be right.
I think we hadn't really ever tried to name ourselves until the name really became obvious to us, because Clearwater Bay is a place that has become very near and dear to all of our hearts, I think. And I think, Gwen, are you guys on Clearwater Bay or close by in your cottage?
We're on Deception Bay, which is an offshoot of Clearwater Bay.
Right. So it's a place that we all really enjoy spending time.
Well, lovely. Gwen, you described playing chamber music as necessary for you and David, and I'd love to hear more about that, and also from the rest of you. Is chamber music also something that you feel is necessary for you?
Well, I was thinking about this because you had sent us some prep sort of questions, and I knew this was coming. And it reminds me of a picture that I need to find of my family, so my parents, my brother, and myself. I realize now that I guess chamber music has always been a part of our lives. There is a picture of our family, my parents and my brother and I, from when I was maybe 8, and we were sitting in piano quartet formation. So my dad had a viola, my mom was at the piano, my brother had the cello, and and so we actually probably played Mozart. In fact, I'm quite sure we did play Mozart piano quartets when I was that age. Very early on, my parents would have Sunday afternoons at our house was chamber music, and so Jackie Parker, or John Kumar Parker, as he's professionally known, and other Vancouver, sorry. I grew up in Vancouver. Vancouver musicians come to our house every Sunday afternoon, and we would play music from a very young age on. So it has always been a part of my life. I hope it is always a part of my life. There's something so satisfying about being able to play with a group of people you know so well, and you just have a freedom that you don't have in any other, for me at least, in any other performing genre.
How about you, Yuri?
Yeah, I mean, chamber music is incredibly important to me as well. It's hard to overemphasize its influence in my life. I think most kids growing up playing music, if they don't have, especially string players, if they don't have the, many of us have the desire to, become a great soloist. And once we all realize that that's probably not going to happen, most of us want to grow up and play in a string quartet and travel around. And I think probably like most young string players, that's something that was my dream as well. I would say for me, playing music with other people and especially playing music with people I love is something that is absolutely essential to living. And one of the things for me that I hope that happens in this moment in time that we're experiencing right now is that families, households, whether they're in the same family or not, actually make music together, and that it kind of reminds people that music is something that's important and that they can experience and sometimes need to experience for themselves by playing it themselves instead of just going to a concert or listening to a CD. And that's been something that's been really life-giving to me and my family over the last few weeks is just gathering around the piano and playing, whether it's a great piece of chamber music or just kind of goofing around on some crazy video game music that my son is improvising on, or if it's singing hymns or whatever that might be. Just making music together as a family, as a household, has become something that's been a real lifeline for us.
That's so lovely. And chamber music is often described as, music with friends, right? Music among friends. And that's one of the things that's so lovely about the string quartet too, is that the four of you have worked together so long and know each other so well as friends, as well as colleagues in many capacities. Now, how about you, Karl? Because I know you've been recording a lot of solo Bach lately. So how is playing chamber music different for you, and how is it necessary in your career?
I came to it early, like everyone else did. My brother is a cellist, my mom's a pianist. And we played piano trios together, and there's a lot of great piano trios. One of my first experiences playing a really great piece of chamber music was the Mendelssohn D minor trio. And I was 12 or 13, and my brother was 10, and my mom wanted to play a whole bunch of notes on the piano because, man, there's a lot of notes in that piece, the piano notes. And I have so many good memories about playing that. We played it for, Gwen has already mentioned John Camara Parker. He came up to Prince George where I was growing up, and he heard us play it. And it was the first time I talked to him, and more than just being a great experience, it was also one of these moments where I said, wow, I get to talk to some really cool people doing this too. And so I played it all through that. One of my first experiences in university was getting to know people was playing Brahms, I think it was the G major cello, the cello quintet, and I got to know these really cool, fun, interesting people, and I met them really quickly, and it was because what we do is we play in a lonely practice room a lot. And this is a way for us to bring the violin, to bring music outside of the lonely practice room. And it's a social way of connecting with other people who do the same thing. And as an adult, and as a professional musician now, it's become so obvious that the people who do not have as much experience with chamber music do not have the same social connectedness with other musicians. And I say this as an adjudicator. I go to adjudicate in festivals, in other music festivals, kids in Canada. And the ones like the piano and the vocal, they're always the most competitive. The kids are there, they don't talk to each other. They're in this frame of competition trying to win. And the string ones, all of the string players, they know each other. They play music together all the time. They're yapping between each performance. They talk to each other. They congratulate each other when one of them wins. And that just is part of who, as string players, I think particularly we become this social circle of people because we work together all the time, playing chamber music, playing the greatest music really ever written. In university, we have the best group projects ever. And I know I have 2 kids in university. My wife teaches in university, and group projects are not their thing. But for me, when we played group projects together, that was chamber music, that was awesome.
And Dan, how about you? You also come from a musical family. Did you start playing chamber music at a young age as well?
Well, my brothers and I are musical, but my parents weren't. So my grandfather played violin, and we would go over to his place, which is about an hour's drive away from home. and he would teach me fiddle tunes and dance tunes. And eventually, by the time I got to be a young teenager, we could play for 3-4 hours, play tunes, and then he would teach me the harmony parts to go along with all of this. But playing chamber music is something I started to do. For me, it's synonymous with me playing the viola. I went to a chamber music camp as a kid. I think I was 13. I'd always played violin up to that point. And my teacher, you know, I don't know, I wasn't a great violinist. I didn't really enjoy it that much. He said, well, why don't you try and play the viola? We don't have any violists at the camp. And it was his sons that were coming back to teach at it. It was Malcolm Lowe, who just retired as concertmaster at Boston Symphony, and his other son, Darren, who's concertmaster in Quebec City. And all of a sudden I was thrown in with the best violinists, the best cellists, and this instrument actually fit me. I always felt like I was too big to play the violin, just felt so cramped. I liked the size of it. I loved the sound of it. That was my voice. And that introduction to chamber music for me, I've never looked back. I've been so fortunate with all of my colleagues now, my colleagues and peers in university to do that. It's that communication and that social interaction that you have in a rehearsal, that you have afterwards, that you have after a concert. There's nothing quite like it. It's just electrifying, and it's a closeness that is established between all of us that I don't know that we would have it without that musical connection between us all.
These are such beautiful descriptions. And I would agree, my closest friends as a teenager were the people I played chamber music with. Mm-hmm. But, you know, something I'm wondering is, as a young person, when you're in high school and going to chamber music camps, or maybe you're in university and you get assigned a new string quartet or piano trio every year, how is that different from the experience of playing with the same string quartet for many, many years in a row? Yuri, do you want to start?
Sure. To be honest, where I am in my life, I find it hard to play with people that I am not already good friends with. I don't know why. I mean, probably not a good thing to admit to professionally. But it really, there's a richness, I think, just as there is in any long-term relationship, right? That's different from a relationship that you just had that just started. So there's some exciting things about playing with people that you've never played before with, of course, and it's great to make new friends. But there's something that you just can't, that's indefinable really about playing with people where you don't need to say anything. They understand you. They understand where you're coming from. There's no sense of competition other than just kind of healthy, kind of fun, making fun of each other. You have lots of nice inside jokes, and I don't know if I could ever play in a chamber group that doesn't have a Karl in it. For instance, but no, there's something that's just, it is, I mean, people have said that playing in chamber, especially a string quartet, is like a marriage. And it really is in many ways like a marriage. So just like any long-term relationship, you do have to work at it. There's certainly, it's easy to kind of fall into some bad places, but I've been very blessed. We've been very blessed in that we all are very sympathetic to one another, and we care a great deal about one another. And we care, I think, more about each other even sometimes than, which is a good thing, then you know, sometimes it's easy to get wrapped up in we have to get this absolutely perfect, which is important, of course, but you don't want to do that to sacrifice your relationships at the expense of that.
How about you, Karl?
What was the question again? I got sidetracked, but from Yuri. You know, this is just like a quartet rehearsal. Basically, Yuri says something, and we get totally sidetracked. And, you know, nobody's rehearsing or paying attention to what we were supposed to be doing, but now the arguments start.
Do you feel like you take on different roles in your string quartet compared to in everyday life?
I don't know if I take on if we take on a different role in the quartet. I think we are who we are in the quartet or in our private lives. And I think maybe that's the great thing about being in the quartet, as in a quartet that's always together rather than one that is formed for a week when you're playing, if you're playing in other events in other places. Then you have to form those roles. You have to figure out where you fit in that group. You have to figure out how can you make comments about this, about how you want a phrase here without dealing and not offend whoever you're sort of directing your comment towards. If you want to comment on the music or whatever, when you're working in a group that always works together, you already understand those relationships really well. You understand each other, so it really makes it a lot easier. And of course, it's made a lot easier by the fact that we're all really good players. So and often you go to another place, you're not sure how people are going to work and how good the players are, and so
speak for yourself, Karl.
Sorry, at least they're all really good players and they tolerate me a lot.
No, obviously the other context in which you all work together and know each other, and the context in which I know you, is through the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. So how is playing in a string quartet altogether different or similar or related to your work together in the WSO? Gwen?
Well, the WSO, so much of how we play is determined by what we're doing at work. And since we've had, had Alexander Mickleswaite as a conductor for when we started. So Alexander directed us in certain directions, and we all have a commonality from where we come from, no matter who's on the podium. And will switch a little bit depending on the basic style that we're working in, but we have the commonality that we come from. We don't come at it from four completely disparate places, and so that has always made things easier to grow from. The thing about playing in an orchestra and playing in a quartet that's completely different is that in a quartet we each have a voice and we can each instill our voice, whereas when we play in the orchestra, that voice, that interpretation, vision comes from an external source. And that's the biggest difference.
But that intimacy between the four of you in that context still seems to carry some weight, and I think is also apparent, and makes for these more intimate and more close-knit performances somehow. Karl, were you going to say something as well? With Yuri?
Well, I was going to sum up what Gwen had to say. She was trying to be politically correct. Basically, the great thing about playing a quartet is we do not have to listen to a conductor.
Fair enough. Touche.
But I think that the other thing is I think you were just getting at it, is that of course all of us, we all try to approach our job in the orchestra as much as possible, even though it is basically a different thing for the reasons that we just said. We try to approach it using the same instincts and the same skills that we learn in chamber music. And I think that, as you're saying, I think it does come out on stage at this symphony as well.
Well, I think the those two aspects of our careers do complement each other. And I think the work we've done as a quartet does influence what happens in the orchestra. And I think the orchestra very much influences what we do as a quartet.
Yeah. And I think in really tangible ways, like, for instance, the way that we set up as a quartet is unusual. We don't usually, most quartets don't set up this way, where I sit next to Gwen And that came from, it's a nod to Andrei Boreyko, who towards the end of his tenure had the orchestra sitting that way. And we just like it. And sometimes we do other things depending on if we really need a different setup for a different piece. And we don't always do it. We often don't do it in, say, like a piano quintet. But for our string quartet, we almost always sit the way we sit, which is probably weird to most other quartets. What most people would think is very strange.
But I also think it works incredibly well for us because Karl is so incredibly strong as a player.
Yeah. Well, that's very kind of you.
It also speaks to our flexibility, being able to sit in any configuration, and we can work together, and it makes it easy.
I like the setup too because it keeps me as far away as possible from the choir.
Right,
I knew that was coming. I totally knew that was coming.
They're like brothers once or twice removed.
Well, and that way they each have Dan and I in between them, so we're in the buffer zone.
We used to always say that if Karl and I were agreeing about something, then there's something wrong with the universe.
This is really
we just typically we always have the opposite idea about whatever we're doing.
That's so funny. I think this definitely is giving our audience a sense of the different kinds of dynamics that happen behind the scenes in a string quartet. From the compliments to the criticisms to the humor. It's really nice. Now, a few of you have mentioned high school students. Karl, I loved what you said about how much more well-rounded and supportive young musicians who also have experiences playing chamber music are. And what advice would you have for students who are embarking on chamber music for the first time? Maybe they didn't have the chance to play chamber music in high school and now are starting university and are going to be in a chamber music group.
If you're asking me, learn your parts, because there's nothing more frustrating for other people and embarrassing for yourself if you show up and everyone's learned their parts and you haven't. So know what you're doing as well as possible, and that really, really makes for relationships to go a lot smoother and for rehearsals to go a lot smoother. So yeah, that's the first thing. I'll let other people comment on other aspects of it.
It's a pretty good first step.
Not only knowing your own part, but technically being comfortable with it, but knowing everybody else's parts as well, knowing what the bigger picture is for everything. I see a lot of that kind of kids are missing out on what they just kind of get the blinders on, learn their part, but they don't know how it fits or how it speaks to everybody else in the group.
Yeah. I think that brings to a third point. Maybe this doesn't happen so much with people who are just starting out as chamber musicians, but I think it's also really important to approach it with a humility that sometimes you run across people who are just so absolutely convinced that they're right, and whether it's intonation or phrasing or whatever.
Oh, that's great coming from you, dude.
I know. I'm not saying act like me.
But don't act like Karl either.
Yeah.
Be humble like me. And no, but it's true. Like those people who like me can be a real pain in the butt. But you have to approach it, and at least with at least the idea that you can be convinced of somebody else's point of view, or at least if you can't be convinced, to play in a way that is convincing, something that doesn't actually resonate with you. Karl.
How about you, Gwen?
Well, I think Karl's comment about learning your part is really, really, really important. My comment was going to be flexible, because that's what comes after learning your part. And I'm hoping that all the students at the University of Manitoba who happen to study with us are watching this, because that is the first thing that really needs to happen. Be flexible and be willing, as Yuri says, to play something, even if you don't 100% believe in it, figure out a way to make it sound like you believe in it.
I mean, these are such lovely pieces of advice. And I think what's clear from all of them is that they're great pieces of advice for all musicians, you know, for any active music making, and also great pieces of advice for life, I think. I mean, I can't think of more important things to do than to be prepared and to be flexible and be humble and be willing to try things and give them a shot. So I think that really speaks to chamber music as, exactly as Gwen said, this thing that's really necessary and really fundamental, and that teaches all of us some of the most fundamental skills for living and for being musicians. Wow, I feel like we've arrived at this really great point, and it feels silly to sort of take it back to some more banal questions. But you know, right now, we don't know when we're going to be able to return to classrooms, to concert halls, to have rehearsals in person with people who aren't in our families or in our close households. So what's some advice you would give to students who are interested in chamber music, wanting to learn more about chamber music? What's some advice you would give to them? And also maybe what's some repertoire you'd really recommend that they listen to or explore? Yuri, any thoughts?
Well, I think it depends. It really depends who's in your household. If you're lucky enough, like we are, to have other string players in your household, or pianists, of course, you can explore some pretty amazing repertoire just in your own house. But if you're in a house with people who don't have a lot of musical background or skill, I think singing is probably the best thing that you can be doing. You can learn so much from singing. And if you yourself are a somewhat skilled musician, and the people around you don't have as much experience as you can learn a lot just from learning how to giving them the melody, you learning to sing the bass or the alto or whatever, harmony lines, that kind of thing. You can learn. I really think whatever instrument you play, if you're an instrumentalist, you can learn the most about phrasing and about ensemble blend from singing. And I was lucky enough as a kid to grow up singing in choirs. Actually, I did a lot more singing than I did cello playing when I was in a kid. And so that has had a huge influence on me. And so I tried to kind of instill that in my family. And it's a skill that's really been lost over the last 100 years. It used to be that everybody sang all the time. Nowadays, people are not singing nearly as much, and I'm hoping as well that we enjoy a renaissance of that in our own family units.
Thanks, Yuri. How about you, Dan?
Well, I think key repertoire depends on your own instrument too. There's, like Yuri is saying, with the addition of a piano in the household, there's so much you can explore. I think listening, we have all these, especially people growing up now, have so much technology so close and so fast. You could spend all day and never listen to the same thing twice, or you listen to it from one chamber group to another chamber group. You can have 24 to compare it to. I think it's a valuable thing to spend some time, like Karl was saying, come in with all of your notes prepared. Well, if you really love Beethoven string quartets, sit down and learn. You play violin, learn the first violin parts. Just start at the beginning and go through. Learn the second violin parts. Study the score so that you know what everybody else is doing as well. Or maybe there are some art songs that you want to play that now's a chance. You've got nothing but time to explore. Transcribe them to violin, transcribe them to cello, whatever the case may be. I think it's it's a good way not only to keep our brains active and engaged, but to keep things fresh. Maybe you'll find something that really speaks to you. Maybe, that will be your voice. Or that's something that you can bring to your chamber group and say, hey, I've discovered something here. Can we sit down and try this when that time finally arrives?
And Gwen, what about of the string quartet repertoire? Is there some, body of string quartets that you think every student needs to really listen to and understand and master a particular piece?
I would stick with the absolute classics, Haydn and Beethoven and Mozart, because that is where the fundamental arrangements are. My comment to your original question is keep practicing on your own, so that when we do finally come out of this, you are as strong a player as you can be, because the stronger player you are, the easier it is to play chamber music.
For sure.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I have a lot of friends who've been, and it's just, it's kind of goofing around, but what they do is they've been learning. So say there's the Dvorak Terzetto, it's for two violins and viola, and they're actually learning all the parts and putting them together digitally. And that's kind of fun if you've got some digital abilities, or if you just want to learn how to do that stuff. It's a great way of learning all the parts, of knowing what you have to do when and where, and how everything fits together, and trying to lay it down. I mean, there's no better way to learn something than hopefully you get to play it with other people eventually.
That's for sure. And recording yourself and playing with yourself keeps you honest too.
It sure does.
You can't blame anyone else for rushing or slowing down when it's you that you're playing with.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any last thoughts that they'd like to share with our audience? Anything else essential?
Just keep playing. I think it's really easy. Keep doing things that are real. I think it's really easy to just kind of sit forlorn on your couch watching Netflix. I think doing real things, playing, singing, walking, doing anything that's real, I think is something that I say do it, because we have enough virtual stuff in our life. Find real things to do.
Thanks, Yuri.
And I just want to say, just the chamber music and this particularly the string quartet repertoire, it is just the greatest repertoire there is, and there is nothing that has not been expressed or that is not expressible through the quartet. I mean, Gwen mentioned Haydn and Beethoven. Those 16 Beethoven quartets are, one of the great creations known to man. But not forget what Shostakovich said through his quartets, and we just played last week. We had to record one, Shostakovich's 8th Quartet, which is absolutely amazing. Bartók quartets, and if we get away from the quartet repertoire, Werkler to Nach Schoenberg, so much amazing repertoire that I hope that every person, every kid going to university, every old person who's nearing the end of their lives, I hope that they spend lots of time listening to this amazing work.
If you want music to cheer you up, listen to Dvorak string quartets.
Absolutely.
Well, what this conversation has certainly made clear to me, and I suspect to those of you watching and listening, is that the four of you, I think, have some of the luckiest jobs in the world. Playing the absolute best music known to exist with some of the best people, and really doing the thing that you love with friends and sharing with each other. So, I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to do what we do as musicians and to make music with people. And I hope that the students out there listening who play chamber music and who are looking to play chamber music also realize that and take it on with that sense of privilege, and also with that sense of intimacy and vulnerability, and also of the kind of magic that it really is. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolutely wonderful conversation, and it's been really nice to connect with you after several months of not being able to be in person. So thank you.
Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Naomi.
Thanks, Naomi.